So once again, thank you for joining us today. Our keynote presentation for the 9th Annual Non-Dilutive Funding Summit will be presented by the NHLBI, or rather Dr. Larry Mahan from the NHLBI. A few words about Larry, and once again, oh no, you were wanting to say about Jody, right, so I'll leave that to you. So Dr. Larry Mahan is the director of the Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination, OTAC, the NHLBI. OTAC advances the mission of the NHLBI and the NIH by providing leadership and coordination to accelerate the translation of innovations to commercialized products that improve patient care and enhance public health. OTAC's mission is to accelerate the translation of basic discoveries and innovations into new diagnostics, devices, and therapeutics. Dr. Mahan is a successful business professional in innovation management and advanced biomedical technologies with a domestic and international track record in business alliance development. Dr. Mahan is also an accomplished senior scientist in biomedical research encompassing cellular, molecular biology, pharmacology, functional genomics, proteomics, neuroscience, immunology, and biochemistry, including 12 years of service at the HHS, Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Mahan is an international lecturer on scientific research and biotechnology industry development, an author of over 100 published articles and abstracts, and a holder of 4 US patents. The PhD was received in physiology and pharmacology from UC San Diego. Without further ado, as I'd like to say, please welcome Dr. Mahan for our keynote today.
Well, thank you all for being here. I want to thank FreeMind and Al for the invitation, and Dr. Jody Black. I regret she can't be here. She had a conflict to come up at the last minute, so I'm filling in. And as Ram said, I'm a director of a relatively new office at NHLBI, OTAC, and you can think of us as the external industry-facing component of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. I would like to have the 2 of my staff here stand up for a minute. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kurt Merrick and Dr. Chris Sasiela. Chris has to catch a plane, but I wanted a face recognition here. She is our regulatory specialist, and I'll talk about her work in the office as it relates to you all. And Kurt will be around later. He is the point of contact head of our SBIR program, so very important person to also know to help you with the non-dilutive funding topic today. So, you know, I've been at JP Morgan all week, and I thought it would be only fair to, as everybody else has, give a forward-looking statement about my comments today. I urge you to read it now. Take a second, and if everybody's good, I can feel good about going on and telling you about our programs. So just, I know probably many of you are familiar with NIH and its mission, but I just want to strike that also in addition to advancing fundamental knowledge about living systems, I want to underscore the application of that knowledge, because that's really what we're going to be talking about today. And as you know, NIH both on campus, intramurally and extramurally supports basic research, has its own translational research programs, amazing clinical research programs and networks. And this is all about disseminating knowledge to the public, to industry, and to researchers worldwide. Today I really am going to focus on that support for the development of therapeutics and devices, diagnostics and research tools, and other platform technologies that support the NHLBI mission space. So, you know, when we look at this, it's such a simple straight line. You know, there's an unmet need that needs to be defined, and you want to ultimately meet that need in patients. But for academic innovators, for young companies, academic innovators who become CEOs of young companies, it really can sometimes be a complete labyrinth and mystery as to what are the right steps to do in what order and what is available to you to help you along that way. And we have tried to look at removing some of that black box and define what we call a translational research ecosystem, and to look inside that ecosystem and see where we as NHLBI can both support ongoing programs that we have and create new initiatives to try and identify issues and gaps in that system. So I know most of you are familiar with the basic research mission of NIH, but NIH also broadly defines its applied research component, and this is from 2013. And while it is true that a lot of that 46% attribute goes to the clinical trials network, today I'm going to talk about some significant programs that are in place that actually are very helpful to companies and academic institutions that get into the more hardcore product development related activities, if you're not familiar with them. And NHLBI, just to give you a perspective to the 27 institutes and centers, we're the third largest. Just in the time that Ram talked, where we had that $3.1 billion budget, it's dropped now to 2.9. This is the fluid government funding environment that we're in. This is actually our continuing resolution effective operating budget that occurred. But I think you can see we still have significant funding, but it is a challenge, okay? It is admittedly a challenge. NIH enjoyed the mandated doubling of the budget, but now we're actually seeing a flattening or even a decline in the financial resources that we have. So, with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about NHLBI. And NHLBI's mission really is to provide global leadership in research, training, and education, to promote the prevention and treatment of heart, lung, and blood diseases, and also sleep disorders. Many people don't realize that as well. And enhance the health of all individuals to live a longer life. So we look at, as I say, we deal with 3 of the 4 highest mortality rate diseases in the US, cancer being second, but we are focused in heart disease, in chronic lung disorders, in stroke. So these have heavy unmet needs and are certainly a focus for industry opportunity to work with us and create innovative technology opportunities to solve some of these dire problems. We also have a strong interest in the nation's blood supply, and particularly those patients that are heavily affected by it with blood disorders. And so the Institute also has a keen interest in areas in this nature. So the fact is that there's over $300 billion of impact in direct healthcare costs or lost productivity in many of the cumulative areas of our focus. And you'd like to think that, why not take a percent of that, $1 billion, and just give it to us annually. It's amazing. A lot of money goes towards research. A lot of money is out there on the distal ends of venture capital and other angel networks. But I think we all know that there's that gap in the middle that makes survival through the most early stages of discovery very difficult. So NHLBI focuses in 3 areas with regard to how we see ourselves playing a role in supporting translational research. We have resources and service-based activities and programs. We work in the space of what I call lab-to-market technology development enabling programs, and we have strong relationships with clinical networks that can begin to help the promising technologies begin their first-in-human studies. So I'm going to talk about some of the programs within NHLBI that are available to NHLBI awardees, and these are both available to companies and innovators and academic institutions. The SMARTT program, Science Moving Towards Research, Translation, and Therapy, actually provides rapid preclinical development services, tailored pharmacology, toxicology testing, manufacturing services, and regulatory support. And for all these programs that I'm going to mention, these are by application. The applications are competitive, and I will, in the talk, have I will leave behind the talk for you guys, and there will be references to the websites for these programs where you can find information, so you don't have to take extensive notes here. SMARTT serves almost equally small business and academic organizations, and as I said, among their 4 areas that they focus, a majority is in the Pharm Tox and Regulatory Affairs Services. And so I encourage you to, if you are an NHLBI awardee, to look into these programs. They are in-kind services. They don't give you money to do these, but they will do these studies for you or these advisory services for you for free. And across SMARTT's disease focus areas, it's just an indication they play across all areas within our mission space, and this will give you an idea of some of the particular indications that they work in. So next I wanted to just mention the Gene Therapy Resource Program. This has 3 basic areas that it works on. It has across the U.S. vector production cores, it has Pharm Tox testing core, and it also has a clinical coordinating center. And this is really all about facilitating the translation of gene therapy under development in outside organizations and providing these kinds of services to facilitate them. So again, it's to applications within our space, and it provides the preclinical and clinical grade vectors for gene therapy trials, all the Pharm Tox and ancillary immunology services that one might wish to do. And then it provides us support for clinical protocols and assistance on the regulatory issues. As you know, this is an area that has very unique to its own product development path, regulatory issues and use in human. So another program that we have is called PACT, or Production Assistance. And this really is a cell therapy manufacturing platform. They can be assistive in process development, product scale-up for cellular therapies. They do process validation, SOPs, all the things that one would need for IND, for later IND enabling studies, or for later GMP production to get all this worked out. It's one thing to make some cells in a bioreactor on the bench, as you all know. It's another thing to scale them up to your intended use, and PACT can really give some strong insight as to what it takes to do that and help do that. They will be involved in the product shipping to clinical sites, education and training for those working on programs in your organizations, and as I said, they'll assist in the clinical study development. So another resource that many people don't appreciate is BioLink, and this is a very unique repository of over 4.9 million biospecimens from a number of unique studies, and it also encompasses almost 600,000 individuals represented in about 110 clinical trial studies at this point. And again, these studies sometimes have included extremely deep longitudinal analyses, and again, the specimens are divided across the areas that I've shown you here, all within the NHLBI mission. So again, can be an incredible reservoir. Samples are free for biomarker validation, etc. So this is just a summary. I'm not going to go through all these. As I said, I'll leave this behind for you, but it has the links and sort of a summary of each of the programs. In addition, at the NIH level, NCATS has a variety of also similarly enabling programs that will play in this translational and product development space. You may or may not be familiar with them. The Molecular Libraries program for small molecule screening. There's medicinal chemistry expertise. There's high throughput assay development services and expertise. Trend has a particular focus on rare and neglected diseases and clinical candidates that play in that space. And Bridges works on the clinical candidate development, some synthesis, scale-up, analytical method development. So I encourage you to check these resources out. Again, these provide a very cost-efficient development program for you if you are able to access them. NCATS also supports the CTSA network. This is a national consortium of 60+ organizations conducting clinical research, medical centers. And I bring this up because NCATS is also involved with the SBIR program you heard about, and it connects to small businesses, and the small businesses can look and interact and see how the utilization of the knowledge within these clinical centers in the CTSA network can help benefit your needs. And again, just a summary of some of the clinical networks that NIH has put together. It continually adds more. Please look into these if they're in your product development space or discovery space, because they can really aid and the knowledge gained from those people working in that clinical research space can be invaluable for you, as whether you're in the academic setting or whether you're a small company or medium-sized company, to map out what your regulatory path will look like and what your clinical trials programs could look like. So I want to turn the discussion a little bit. Those are the resources at NIH, but I want to back up and look at, so in this translational research ecosystem, where are some of the hurdles that we are also trying to address? And I think, we've heard ad nauseum about gaps in the system, and we know clearly that for many years now there's been this funding gap. And the funding gap really, research performing institutions start to get into a little bit of preclinical validation work, but that's not their role. That's not what PIs on R01s are designed to do. So how do you get that into a company that takes that technology out and then now has to mount that, find the dollars to do that, when everybody on the investment side is looking for de-risked technologies? And so while funding is an issue, we also recognize that both in the academic environment, in the small company, one person wearing 5 hats, there's a knowledge gap of what to do. They could be incredibly familiar with the technology development issues, but that may be where it stops. And moving from the development of a technology vision into a hardcore product definition, knowing everything about the targeted product profile and what standards it has to meet to be in a patient, is a tremendous amount of knowledge. And it's very rare is the person, unless they're a serial entrepreneur who's been there, done that, who automatically knows what that technology will face in moving it forward. Similarly, there's just sometimes a basic knowledge, lack of knowledge in the technology and commercialization space, as I said, but also in the resources. And that's where we've tried at NIH and NHLBI to put some enabling resources in place to move down that commercialization path. And then finally, as I said, there's been this waning industry and investor interest in insufficiently de-risked opportunities or in low return on investment indications. And so we're really trying to look how our programs can address some of these issues. And I want to tell you a little bit about the office and some of the newer programs that we've put together to do this. So back about 2009, a working group was convened to take a look at some issues about is NHLBI and its investment in its programs across the board, what kind of return on investment are we getting? And if it's less than what we think it should be, what kind of programs and initiatives could we put in place to try and address those gaps? So the group met for about a year, and they issued a range of strategic directives from their findings, and one of them was to create, in essence, what is today OTAC. And it is that our job to really facilitate and catalyze these development initiatives. It's also to think about how we can expand our funding opportunities in that translational research space. You heard about some of the changes to the SBIR program. I can talk a little bit about that, where we can come up with new ways to think about how to expand the utilities of those programs. We also are very involved in industry outreach. I've spent my last 3 days here with industry meetings, all to do with looking to form industry partnerships and let them know about the quality of companies in our SBIR portfolio, let them know about some other initiatives I'm going to tell you about, and to raise the awareness bar of what they should be paying attention to the discovery and technology development opportunities in our space. And finally, it's nice to do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we want to evaluate ourselves and make sure that we, in fact, are meeting our objectives in this translational research ecosystem. And I'll speak a little bit more about how we're doing that later. So OTAC, you heard the mission. It's to provide that leadership and coordination to accelerate translation of basic discoveries and innovation into marketable healthcare products, or devices, diagnostics, mHealth technologies, platform technologies. We're very agnostic. We just want to see things that have proven and measurable patient benefit, which is, if you've gone to any of the meetings today, that is now the mantra, right? It's prove the measurable benefit for the patient, because actually you have to prove it to the payer. And that's the world we live in the US. If you can get reimbursement, it will get adopted and put into use. And therefore, that's how you get your impact to the patient. So this ecosystem that OTAC works in is very diverse. We work internally within the NIH, a program I'll tell you about. We work with academic institutions, we work with small companies, and we have a particular focus on academic entrepreneurship and innovation, because we put so much money, as does NIH, into basic research. We want to see capitalizing on that and take that percentage of that basic research that can move into technology development and commercialization. We want to see that go as efficiently and successfully as possible. So OTAC really has 4 areas of focus. We now hold the SBIR-TT Program coordination for the Institute. We're deeply involved in strategic initiative development. We, as I said, conduct outreach and partnership activities, and then we have a number of resources in the office that I'll talk to you about. So in the SBIR-TTR area, we, Kurt, Dr. Merritt here, who you can talk to later, we're administer the phase 1 and phase 2. We work with the companies. Kurt has been deeply involved with his counterparts across the other SBIR programs to develop targeted FOAs, in addition to the omnibus solicitations, where we can define unmet needs as challenges for you all to apply for. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the small markets and bridge awards in a second. So this is the way I like to think of us, and it is in fact the topic of the meeting. We are an $80 million fund, if you will, non-dilutive, that's available to tap. And we have the privilege and the responsibility to spend that annually. And my attitude coming into the office, I've only been in the office about 6 or 7 months now, is to very much look at this from the standpoint of an investment portfolio manager perspective. My goal is I want the best-in-class companies in that portfolio, and I want absolute successful exits from that portfolio. So I'm as vested and interested in seeing high-quality applications and companies come into the portfolio, but I am just as vested, as are the people in my office, to see long-term sustainable success of those companies going forward. Otherwise, we will not meet our goal of making meaningful patient benefit from the types of products that you all are engaged in developing. As Ram mentioned, we're on a little climbing period now to increase that percentage of allocation out of the general research budget, and it is climbing. Today it's about 80 million, and by 2017 it'll climb to a little over 3.5%. And so the good news is that even if the NIH budget fluctuates, our budget fluctuates a little bit, we're going to see minimally a steady state, if not an increase in the amount of funding available to the program. Ram went through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to just outline, we do have the SBIR-STTR program. There's different percent involvements for you all, whether you're working with a university partner on the STTR side or other research performing institution versus a go-it-alone solo company effort. And so there are these 3 phases that we deal in. The last is yours. We don't fund it. This is where you launch and you go into your commercialization phase, and we're enabling you with the phase 1 and phase 2 programs. Our portfolio currently looks a bit like this. We're a little over half in the cardiovascular space. We also are about equally weighted in the lung disease space and the blood disease and other resources. So, and again, therapeutics and devices take up most of the portfolio, but we still have a strong interest in research tools and diagnostics as well. So you can see there's some imaging and health IT, and given the changes in the health IT industry and integrated systems and things like that, I think we'll be looking forward to some interesting opportunities being presented to us that work more in that integrative cross-platform technology and product space. I'm not going to get into this, but this are programs that are available to help young companies understand their commercialization opportunities, to evaluate the options, and to meet with industry expertise to help plan their strategies going forward. Again, it'll be on my leave behind. So what do we do in the strategic initiative space? So we have launched some very significant programs. One I'll mention, the NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovations. We've also been very engaged in the release and now being awarded bridge phase 2B and small market extensions to the SBIR program. We also have been deeply involved in the creation of the SBIR-TT program I'll tell you about. And then we have an entrepreneur in residence program that it was a collaboration with a company in Maryland where we have someone actually walking the halls of NIH looking at technology commercialization opportunities within the NHLBI mission space. So just a word about the Bridge and Small Market Awards. So realizing that sometimes even that roughly 2 million is really not enough to get certain technologies as far down that commercialization path as they should be, we've instituted $1 million a year per 3-year extension to that program. Now, it does require matching from the investment community, but we've weighted it differently. So these are for products that need FDA approval. If you're in a conventional broad market space, you need $1 million for every $1 million you get from us. If you're in a rare diseases or pediatric, literally small market space, it's only 1 to 3. And so this is a way for you to capitalize on the first $2 million from the program, add another 3, leverage 3. So we're talking around 8, and if you get a little more interest, $10 million around one project in one company. So I think that's been a significant advance to helping you all move down that pipeline development path. In addition, a little bit about the SBIR-TT program. I'll sum it up to just simply say we're going to pay you to commercialize technologies that you find as opportunities within the NIH. This is a terrific idea. Historically, you would go out and apply for an SBIR. You might see a technology at NIH you want to develop, but then you have to separately go deal with the tech transfer office to work out some sort of licensing agreement to use the technology in exploring its development. The TT program wraps us all into one package. So a successful applicant minimally gets an internal non-exclusive research use license concurrently, so that you can begin for a term period to explore whether or not this intramural opportunity really is commercially viable. Once you move down past the normal phases of the award and it looks viable, then you can go back and are highly encouraged to cut an appropriate licensing deal with the tech transfer office, whether it's exclusive or non-exclusive, depending on what that technology requires for you to be able to get further capital investment for it. And again, the whole point here is that the small business concern is enabled and to help accelerate their ability to look at promising opportunities within our portfolio and take them out and get them into product development. We also strongly encourage the relationship with the PI around that technology, and they can have an involvement in helping you all, but minimally it does need their support. So you do want to have an interaction with the PI, have discussions about what you want to do, and it does need a letter of support from them to do that. So what are some of the highlights? Ron mentioned a couple of them. I'm just going to touch upon. So we are in the actual process of lifting the hard caps on phase 1 and phase 2 at the Institute's discretion, at the nature of the application and the opportunity and what it may or may not require, and the quality of the application. We will consider lifting that 225 and 1.5 hard cap that some of you are familiar with. You can now switch between SBIR and STTR. So you may find that you require a research performing institution, an academic institution, as something critical that you need to create a partnership with, which would move you into the STTR space. You can now do that. Additionally, I don't have it here, inter-institutional or agency jumping between a phase 1 and phase 2 is also more easy than it used to be in the past. And then coming down the pipeline, Kurt was telling me just now, probably any day now, they'll be releasing the direct to phase 2 application. Whether or not it will make it into our April round, we're not sure yet, but it's definitely something that's coming down the pipeline in the future for you guys. So I want to tell you a little bit about the NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovation and the connectivity of the purpose of this initiative to small business. So we launched this fall a $32 million investment in creating 3 centers in the US. They're a consortium of research performing institutions and medical centers. As you can see here, they involve some very significant organizations. And in partnership, we at the NIH and NHLBI have created formal relationships with the FDA, USPTO, CMS, Kaiser, and NSF in particular. We're interested in their I-Corps program and their entrepreneurial development activities to create a multi-partnered ecosystem. And the elements of any one center is to focus on developing a technology opportunity, to develop the team and the innovator around that process, and to end up with truly commercially viable and validated business models around that technology. This is within the four walls of the academic environment. And we recognize that the institutions that I showed you that are all part of this ecosystem, so we have the 3 centers and we have all of us involved in this. There are some great names in there. There's some great individuals in there. There's serial entrepreneurs in there. We realize that, and we actually are counting on that because we want to raise the entire bar of academic innovation processes so that more can benefit from that knowledge cross-institutionally, cross-individual, to understand how to more rapidly and efficiently move academic discoveries down that commercialization opportunity path. And so how does this work? How's the system supposed to work? So it begins with the centers actually soliciting technology opportunities. They use like RFA or RFP-like process. And they can be therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, and platform technologies. And they come in, and each center has an external selection committee. And it was purposely designed this way to have industry voices at the table in looking at these technologies to give that sobering view of whether or not these technology opportunities really look like they could be commercially viable. They then come to an internal NHLBI level technology review committee where we basically look at the diligence that we've asked to be done around that proposition. We look at it from within our mission space, and we look at it across the board from all centers, all opportunities to make sure we're keeping a diverse portfolio across therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, heart, lung, blood, sleep, because we want to make sure that we're not underserving an area. So our federal dollars went into this program. The centers were asked to match or more those dollars, which they have. They stepped up to the plate. And so the total program at this point in time at launch is a little more than $80 million divided amongst the institutions. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, but when you filter it down to the per project launch, it was not really what we had wished to do. We had really wished to come up with about $24 million per center and start 3 centers, and then this thing called the government and budget and sequestration and uncertain budgets and things happen. And so we ended up being able to come up with $32 million and we kept it at the 3 centers. And the centers have stepped up and looked for external sources of money to put into the pool to try and maintain a pipeline of projects that we had originally anticipated. Once they're given that green light, they go into not just a technology development path, but a commercialization development path to create that rationale around it. And we're looking at some of these, of course, may not make it through that scientific, medical, and business case review, and those are returned back to the centers. And as I said, they now undergo within the partner organizations this comprehensive scientific and technical analysis and laying out of a path of what is going to be tranched funding, milestone-driven, go, no-go decisions. There's a project management aspect of this. The projects get assigned a project manager. And then on the commercial side, we're bringing in all viewpoints of the IP strategy, the IP foundation, is how does that look? What's the business model that this product falls into? What are the risks associated with that? What are the uncertainties that need to be known? So, it's very often the case that people don't want to talk about the uncertainties. And in fact, those are exactly the things you want to talk about so you can see where you can begin to de-risk. Clinical path, the regulatory path, these are all critical elements that are being brought into play in the midst of that technology commercialization launch. So what are we looking for? Well, we're looking that we anticipate if the go, no-go stage gating will work, that some of these, as they do in corporate pipelines, will not meet a milestone, will get returned back to the bin of opportunities, but hopefully with a sharing of knowledge as what was it about that opportunity that others may learn from as to why it didn't hit that milestone. You know, technologies don't hit the milestone sometimes because they just can't, or the milestone was inappropriate. What the envisioned use needs to be rethought. And so we see the ability here to really provide a lot of knowledge around this process in the academic environment where this is a fairly foreign concept. Whereas when I tried this at Children's Hospital one day, a clinical researcher with 7 projects said, go, no-go decisions, you're asking me to kill my babies. And I said, yes, you may have to. That's product development life. But it's hard. It's an emotional decision for people when they're vested in the opportunity that they have created. We're looking for spin-outs, nuco formation, and we're looking for much better, high-quality value assets in the form of licenses. And that's where to some degree it's a self-serving thing. We want to see better companies built off better licenses from the university discovery environment that can benefit our purposes. Also, nothing's fatal. There can be a rethinking of some of these technologies that can be returned into the process, and we would hope that where some of the issues weren't as big, but they did cause a glitch at that point in time, they can be reanalyzed and reconsidered. So within the centers, the Boston, Cleveland, and California centers, we've set in motion this path from the technology solicitation, selection, and the development aspects. And this is where we've looked to bring the resources that we have, that I mentioned, both in NHLBI and NIH as a whole, the various programs and where they can play to help provide these in-kind services to, again, keep as where it's applicable and possible, a cost-efficient approach to the development process. Secondly, we're looking for our partners, the FDA, the payors, USPTO, and NSF, to internally educate. They, of course, can't say, you know, you do this and you're going to get an FDA approval. But they, with their knowledge of what happens in a product class, what the history has been, where the pitfalls have tended to be, can be invaluable. The payors, same thing. Product class, what have the issues been? What has been barriers to adoption? What are their new views on this? So we see that education going downstream as far as possible into the technology development area. Conversely, we see it as a bilateral benefit because it will give the regulators and the payors an opportunity to perhaps see brand new things that they are not yet familiar with, for which there is no reimbursement strategy, no clear regulatory strategy, and it will give them the opportunity to see the future. And we think this is a strong mutual benefit. They realize this, and this is why they've come on board in a formal sense with contacts at every one of their key divisions or whatever, for us to be able to tap in this NCAI process. We also said would encourage strong use of the NIH clinical research networks to enable some phase 0, phase 1 studies as they develop. And as I said this week, it's been all about making industry aware of this. Key to this whole program is industry involvement in the selection committees, in the advisory boards, at the program steering committee level, and in standing on the backside of this where we look at higher value exits, not just for angel and VC investment, but for the non-dilutive funding programs that we watch. So we really look at this sort of phase 0 approach to building our phase 1, the SBIR portfolio, with much higher value asset companies that have a higher long-term chance of success. So, along with that, as the industry partners have been involved internally in the NCAI process, they also now will recognize higher value asset exits, and they will look, and we're hoping to see enabling strategic co-development partnerships form as well, or equity plays out of their corporate venture programs in addition to traditional VCs and angel investment. So we've tried to look at this from a very integrative sense and involve all the key stakeholders in this academic discovery environment. The NCI is one of a couple of new programs that are launching in NHLBI. I'm not going to get into them in depth, but VITA has just released about $9 million in contracts for early stage translational development of products around vascular disorders and thrombotic diseases and pulmonary hypertension. And CADET is a program that's focusing on lung diseases that will be releasing information about the launch of that program as well. So the third component of OTAC, the outreach and partnership. So we strongly believe in the companies that we're putting our investments into, and so we have initiated a series of what we call our regional innovation conferences, where we bring best-in-class companies forward to investors and strategic partners. We also are creating a partnership portal, and we're also making relationships with outside organizations that can accelerate our partnership opportunities for us. We're also looking at creative ways using the foundation at NIH, and a nonprofit arm of NIH, to raise monies to further sustain our efforts. So the regional innovation conferences, the first one was held in the DC area in 2011. We held one in San Diego in 2012, and this is where we put a call out to companies to attend the conference. It's free. Companies that are selected for oral presentations undergo some hours of mentoring by all of us. So we will listen to the pitch. We'll refine the pitch. We'll ask the tough questions. We want to get that best presentation forward for the audience at the conference. And then a number of other companies that weren't eligible perhaps to do the oral presentation come to the conference and have poster presentations. We engineer time for potential investors and strategic partners to meet with as many people as possible. We just held one in San Francisco this fall, and we will be holding one in Boston later this year, and then we're looking and exploring new models to partner with ongoing heavily business partnered investor focused conferences in the technology areas that we are focused on. And so we're creating a partnership right now with AdvaMed, if those of you are familiar with that conference series. And so we're looking to showcase our SBR portfolio companies at AdvaMed, and I think, and discussions are in the works to do the same, not just for us, but for NIH SBR companies at Bio. So we're using both solo and partnered outreach conferences to get you all that are members of our portfolio exposed to the kind of people that will enable your success. And lastly, on the internal services and resources that OTAC provides, I had Chris stand up. She is regulatory specialist. She's been in the FDA. She's available to provide assistance. If she cannot directly answer questions, she will be able to give insight as to who in the FDA and what the topic needs in terms of how to interact with the FDA and how to get the most productive advice from them as possible. And just like the FDA, just like other programs, you constantly hear, you don't talk to us soon enough. That's the case with us. I encourage any of you to contact us well in advance. Don't call us 5 days before the SBIR deadline. Okay, talk to Kurt a couple of months before the deadline, when nobody's time crunched, and you can talk about your SBIR strategy, you can talk about your envisioned product, and get advice, and Kurt can direct you to the appropriate people in the divisions, the program officers, those people that will be seeing your application coming and really help increase that success. The other, we have advice in the commercialization and investment readiness area. That's some of my responsibility. We're likely bringing in a detailer from the USPTO for a year who spent years doing patent examinations and can talk about, maybe you're in a biomarkers area and the recent case law has implications in the way you consider developing, your product. I'd like to be able to give some, high-level guidance as to the kinds of things you should be thinking about. And I also mentioned the EIR program. So we have Ram Iyer, who's at meetings today, couldn't be here. He's going through and identifying those NHLBI opportunities that he believes are ripe for commercialization. And again, these are opportunities for companies outside the NIH to take advantage of potentially. And then we have that thing called the SBIR-TT Program, where we pay you to take advantage of them. So you can see a linkage between the things we're trying to do with our financial advisory partnership outreach activities to try and enable everyone to be successful in this equation. So I'll just give you an idea then, a wrap up on this of how this all works from our view. So there's the omnibus solicitation for the SBIR. We have our portfolio. We're interested in having high quality portfolio, and we, like any investor, want to see exits. We want to see future investment in companies. We want to see partnerships created. We want to see expanded pipelines. We want to get products approved, right? We're all about the patient, as you are. And we are actually also invested in your corporate growth and the economic benefit derived from our public monies. Your monies, my money. So, as I mentioned, we're coming up with new ways to look at targeted funding opportunities, and Kurt's been very involved with this. I can't go into the details, but it's internally to come up with very creative idea creation, if you will, methodologies, so that we can get a diverse viewpoint on what the targeted funding opportunities in the future should look like. We have the traditional mechanisms inside that generate them, but we're broadening those viewpoints to get a more diverse input as to what those future funding opportunities may be. In addition, I mentioned that through the efforts of the NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovation, we're looking for higher value asset exits that will strengthen those companies that license them, or strengthen those companies that spin out of the university environment that will be our future, hopefully, portfolio candidates. We invest our time and effort and human resources in the office to the advisory services I told you about, and as I mentioned, we provide now these outreach programs to try and connect our portfolio companies with the appropriate investors and strategic partners to push those conversations. So basically what I've talked about today is within our ecosystem, this translational research ecosystem, we have all these variety of approaches, programs, and human resources dedicated to enabling and catalyzing the processes that go on within that ecosystem. Again, I have a wonderful team. I walked into a wonderful team. Kathleen Roche directs the NCI program. Kurt runs our SBIR program. Chris is the regulatory specialist. Ram, I mentioned, is our EIR. Steve Flame, who was going to be here, I don't see him. Steve is a serial entrepreneur and angel investor out here in California. He's a special consultant to the program. He is actively involved in all the mentoring of the companies for the pitch coaching. And I have Eric, who is our program analyst and project manager. He runs a particular element of that evaluation system I didn't mention, but we've engaged Deloitte to create an entire ecosystem evaluation system so we can look at every activity we do and how does it meet the goals and objectives of what we're trying to do in this ecosystem. And then we're right in the middle of hiring a business development specialist to add to our advisory services. So at the end of the day, we're trying to address these critical bottlenecks and financial gaps. We are vested in decreasing that time from discovery to product and increase everyone's chances of success. We're strongly encouraging these public-private partnerships and fostering a culture change, especially in that academic innovation environment. And we're trying to create these hubs for technology development that can focus on the development process and the regulatory science research, strong emphasis on entrepreneurial training, and then at the end of the day, it's no good if we don't disseminate it. So we're very strongly engaged in disseminating the knowledge we learn from our programs to you all, to other research institutions. And so what we really want to do is just make it all happen faster, sooner, more successfully, and truly make an impact on patient need. We have a lot of partners, and we rely on them, and we engage them, and we're grateful to all their help and support in this effort. And that's it. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you something about some of the things we're doing at NHLBI and in the office in particular. I believe Al said we could, I take some questions, and then I think the idea was to break down into just some very informal conversation. Kurt's here for SBR things, but go ahead. Yeah.
So thank you for that introduction. Some of us know a lot of it, some of us even know a lot of this is new, fabulous progress, so thank you for sharing that with us. Question about this whole M-Health, mobile health, SaaS-based models. Does the NIH have any reviewers, screeners, experts in that? Any initiatives, any opportunities they're going to be hosting? Anything you can talk about that?
Well, we do have some IT health already in the SBIR portfolio. Kurt, anything coming down the pipeline in terms of expanding that, or the people involved in?
Sure. So mobile health is an area that the NIH in general and the NHLBI in particular is very focused on. We supported the M-Health Summit for the last few years, and we've been in that to a large extent. The NHLBI, we have a number of funding opportunities out now related to mobile health, ones for point-of-care devices, for sickle cell disease, and other research areas. One is around small microfluidic devices that we can use point-of-care settings to diagnose blood, very small quantity of blood, particularly neonatal strain. And there's another one related to the broad announcement to translate point-of-care devices into clinical particular focus on integrating those devices with the health IT network that is big health.
Thank you. Thank you. We recently executed a joint venture with NATO to develop a patented technology, and they have an intervention partner. They're looking for an outside source to lead the investment, look at the device.
So they're willing to syndicate, they just don't want to be the lead. And your relationship with them is under an STTR presently, or? Okay. We should talk offline. There are probably some syndicates. I'd have to know a little bit more about the capital need and their level of appetite and what the But I can talk to you at the workshop. So, for the bridge, so you will have completed or be at that end of term completing your phase 2. The product, as I said, has to qualify in that it will require FDA approval. And so, whether it's a IND path or a 510K PMA path, but it has to be down that FDA approval path. You would have come and applied to us with the next stage rationale for those 3 times $1 million development milestone-driven components that you need. And the person that you would want to lay out that conversation with while you're in that phase 2 space, as you see that this may be where you're heading, would be somebody like Kurt to actually understand when, at one point do I actually need to put this together? What's involved in preparing that extension? There's no direct to phase 2B. Okay, so we're about to release the direct to phase 2.
So we're ready to that direct to phase 2. What's the difference between fast track versus direct to phase 2?
I was like, hey, Kurt. Difference between fast track and direct to phase 2. As that's playing out in what you've seen about the PAR for the direct to phase 2.
Sure, so fast track has to involve a research plan for the phase 1 portion and the phase 3 portion, whereas a direct to phase 2 application has to be predicated on preliminary data that already exists that demonstrates the proof of concept equivalent to what would have done in phase 1. So if I have the phase 1 entirely because you already have the data demonstrating these.
So if there are no other general questions, I think the idea is we'll just sort of break down into informal discussions, and I'm happy to talk to any Kurt's here. So please make use of the time, and we'll help you as much as we can. Thanks.